Hello, I'm Dr. James Bogash, expert in health and longevity and creator of Bogash Life and Balance. And today I just thought I'd open the can of worms. And this has to do with the recent review on myocarditis symptoms in children after vaccination. But before we go into that, we really have to look at where this stands. And having children, having a boy right smack dab in the middle of this controversy, and also having a stepson that was right in the middle of H1N1, we need to put everything in perspective. If you even mention about children dying, like you're heartless and cruel, but we don't ever look at the potential downside for things like school closures and the massive damage to society and these children's education has happened that will take a long time to recover, if ever. So we can't have a discussion on one side without the other. And with everybody returning to school right now, it certainly is, it's actually past time for the discussion. But the thing that we need to look at, first of all, is that COVID is not the danger in children that other things are. Have we lost children? Yes. As of 9/9, September 9th, 2021, we have 460 reports of pediatric deaths under 17. Some states take that up to 19, but in January, 460. So we're looking at about a year and a half's worth. To put that in perspective, every year we lose some 900 kids to drowning. We lose 500 to RSV, which also had an unusual spike in the summer this year. And H1N1, the swine flu, we lost over 1,000 kids to that. So we can't talk about anything without putting things in perspective. And so when we say that COVID is safer for children, it doesn't mean that children aren't at risk, but the risk is so incredibly small. We want to say that of the children who become it's like a 0.01% chance of fatality with COVID. Now, we want to say that any risk is not acceptable, but if the interventions that we do create their own set of harm, then that has to be taken into account. And so school closures, long-term masking of children, the psychological impacts, like those all are, it's all part of the risk-benefit that we have to take into consideration. So this particular study pulled information off the VAERS database, the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. There are certainly challenges with VAERS. It is designed to be looked at for signals. So the authors of this study did the best they could to kind of tease some of that out. They had cases of we're looking specifically at myocarditis, so heart inflammation. They had these cases reviewed by a cardiologist. So they did their best to tease apart the data and get some very real answers. So we can always say, hey, you didn't do this or that, but these researchers have been forthcoming with the problems with this and very open as to how they came to their numbers. And so the real danger is looking at, or concern is in our 12 to 17-year-old boys, specifically so we have to look at the risk of myocarditis and hospitalization from that versus what happens when somebody gets COVID versus vaccination. So you can't make a risk-benefit determination without understanding the risks. And clearly, the interventions we have taken with children have risks associated with them. That's just the reality. It's just fact. Now, some people would say, well, I personally, I think much of this fear of children is actually fear of the adults. Maybe the adults really aren't, this whole concept of, like, you're lucky your kid's still alive type thing. It just doesn't make sense. Because I don't remember having this discussion last year, 2019 or 2018 or 2017 or 2009. We weren't having these discussions. And those were by far more deadly to children than what we have now. And then raises the subject of long COVID. I really need to put something together on long COVID. I am still I think it's a dubious title. It's not that something like that doesn't exist, but I think that there are reasons why this might be happening. And the definition of long might be well within what our accepted recovery time is from a viral issue. So those topics are aside from this. If we look at this, the researchers determined that in the 12 to 15-year-old boys, specifically after dose 2, that their risk of having myocarditis was 3.7 to 6.1 times higher than the risk of hospitalization from COVID. So clearly, these numbers weren't happening a lot, but neither are hospitalizations in kids. And so the vaccine was more risky when it came to myocarditis. We're not talking about anything else. This is just strictly myocarditis and not everything else that might go in that bucket of side effects. A little different for the 16 to 17-year-old boys. 2.1 to 3.5 times higher risk of myocarditis versus having COVID itself. Lots of issues and discussions with kids, but the reality is, we just need to protect our kids, make sure they've got vitamin D, make sure they're getting sunlight, fresh air, relationships with their friends, eating right. These are all very important things that we should be talking about, rather than whether we should send our kids back to school because they're going to die if we send them back, or contribute to spread in the community, which, again, a whole nother conversation. But the data on that is not terribly strong either. So we need to look at data to make decisions, not fear and emotions, because these are too important of decisions for us to be making on emotions alone. We need to have data. And this is just one piece to the puzzle of what's going on. So those parents that are out there thinking, I can't wait till I can get my 11-year-old vaccinated, there's a risk associated with that may not balance out the risk of COVID and the reality of what we have. As always, I'll post a link to this particular study in the description. Make sure you like this video, share it with somebody who you think needs the information, and subscribe to the channel.